Equity Mate.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast that follows our journey of investing. Whether you're an absolute beginner or approaching Warren Buffett status, our aim is to help break down your barriers from beginning to dividend. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Great to be with you for another Monday episode. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got so much to talk about that we've got another podcast.
Okay. Tell me more.
Well, I'm straight into housekeeping. That's how much we've got to talk about. But the 8th podcast from the Equity Mates Media Stable. I don't know if that's what we're calling it. But our latest podcast, The Dive, is... the feed is live. The trailer's out. The first episode will be dropping in a couple of weeks. But there's so much news out there. It's so hard to keep up to date with everything, put it in its bigger context. And so we figured, why don't we have a crack at doing it?
I must caveat that it is not just news, it's business news.
Yeah, we're not going into politics.
Yes, we've felt that for a while, business news has often been considered boring and uninspiring, and our new show, The Dive, is going to be taking one important news piece from around the world, business news piece from around the world, and we're going to be taking a deep dive on that to help you become a better investor and to show you the excitement that business news can be. So subscribe now. We're launching in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, but also, if you haven't signed up for FinFest, go sign up, equitymates.com/FinFest. It is an event that you will not want to miss. People will be talking about it for years to come. You could have been there.
Yeah, well, you can be there. Tickets will be going on sale very soon. So register now so that we can send you all the information. There's going to be DJs, there's going to be bars, there's going to be experts from all around the country helping you become a better investor. It's not going to be all finance. There's going to be other forms of entertainment. It is going to be a festival. It's really exciting. We're pumped. So make sure you register your details so we can keep you up to date.
But Bryce, a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about one of the companies that you and I disagree on the most. We've got some surprising housing data, and it tells us something about investing in megatrends. Berkshire finally bought something. We're going to talk about brain chips, and then we're going to close out with Morningstar's top stocks and what we think about those. A lot to cover. Let's get into it. I want to start with an acknowledgement.
Okay. And
an acknowledgement around a CEO that we disagree on and a company that we disagree on, and that's Meta, aka Facebook. You think it's going to be a $1 trillion company again?
No, well,
$2 trillion?
The bet was that I think it has more of a chance than hitting $1 trillion than not. Yeah, keep going.
Sure. And I have been a little bit off the company, but I want to recommend a piece of content, a non-Equity Mates piece of content. Mark Zuckerberg was recently interviewed on the Lex Fridman podcast. It's about 2 hours long, and it's a very interesting conversation about some of the discussions they're having around the metaverse, the technology they're developing. About an hour of the conversation is Zuckerberg not recognizing the impact that Facebook and Instagram have on political interference, misinformation, health misinformation, mental health, all that stuff. But the metaverse stuff is really interesting, and some of the technology they're developing. Apparently, all their meetings are already in the metaverse, and they're developing like all this stuff to like track your eyes. So like if we're in the metaverse looking at each other, our eyes will actually like move. And then like haptic gloves so you can feel things in the metaverse.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's pretty interesting, yeah.
Okay, so that's what's the podcast called? Just Lex Fridman?
Lex Fridman, yeah.
And for those that aren't aware, he's a Russian computer scientist,
computer scientist, AI researcher.
Russian-American, I think.
Yeah, Russian-American.
Yeah.
Really, really smart guy. Yeah. If you think our housekeeping is too long, you can skip about 10 minutes into his podcast and you'll just get to the end of the ads. But it's worth listening to if you are bullish on Meta like Bryce or you're a little bit wary like me. Either way, whatever you think of Zuckerberg, he built an incredible company and he's looking to do a hard right pivot and try and build something pretty new. And so it's fascinating to watch. And yeah.
So, house price data, Ren. Some surprising data coming out.
Yeah, well, the fact that house prices are incredibly hot isn't surprising.
No.
And to put it in context, in the US in 2021, house prices were up 19%, and they are expected to rise 16% in 2022. So far, no one's surprised. But I think what is surprising, what is notable, is that the three major house listing websites, in the States, the realestate.com.au or domain equivalents, if you're listening here in Australia, Zillow, Redfin, and Opendoor haven't, you'd think that they would be correlated to house prices. And as the housing market is hot, as there's so much activity going on in the housing market, you'd think they would benefit. But in 2021, when the housing market was up 19%, Zillow was down 54%, Redfin was down 44%, and Opendoor was down 36%.
Okay. But where does that fall with the market?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They're unprofitable growth stocks.
Yeah.
A lot of them. And Zillow had its own issue with, they were trying to flip houses, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, it was just those two numbers put side by side is a reminder that investing in megatrends, investing in thematics, isn't always a guarantee of success. Because if you were like, I'm going to invest in the US housing is hot and supply is constrained megatrend.
Picks and shovels.
These three companies would have been some of the biggest holdings in that ETF. And they're all meaningfully down. They're all down by over a third.
Again, this just calls screaming for someone to come out with a residential REIT, both here in Australia and the States.
Yeah, we often talk about that would be a good way for us to get exposure to residential house prices. What it would also do is put more buying pressure on house prices.
Look, if I'm in it one way or the other.
True. Well, or you could say that, the BrickXs of the world would say, we've already solved this problem. You don't need it to be fractionalized through an ETF. It can be fractionalized through our BrickX platform. I don't know.
I actually met someone that used BrickX the other day, and it's panned out.
Has it?
Yeah, more than doubled his money.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, BrickX, for those listening overseas, is an investment app here in Australia that allows you to buy portions of residential property.
Fractionalized property ownership. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway. So some of the crazy data from the US, going back to their housing market, the median homeowner made more from their property increases than the median salary. That's a confusing way of phrasing it, but the median house price increase was $52,000. And the median salary is $50,000.
Yeah, gotcha. You're saying they made more than they were paid.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And in some parts of the country, that just blows out. In San Diego, the median house price increase $160,000. The median salary $55,000.
Wow.
Just property around the world is hot.
I think Sydney's now the second most expensive city in the world.
Really?
For property, yeah.
I had a very demoralizing call with a mortgage broker.
Yeah.
Still so far away.
Yeah, so far away. Anyway, speaking of buying things.
We might not be able to buy things, but the next people we're going to talk about can buy a lot of things.
And that is Mr. Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, who has finally bought something. Ren, we have... He released his shareholder letter about a month ago. We did speak about it on the Get Started Investing podcast. We unpacked it. So if you want to go and check that out, make sure you do. But he revealed that he was sitting on close to $140 billion in cash, or at least $140 billion, 144 or something like that, 160, whatever, a lot in cash on the sidelines, because he felt that there wasn't really any good opportunities presenting themselves. And we know that he is an investor that is incredibly patient and will sit on cash until that opportunity comes. Now,
Hold on. Before you keep going, law of large numbers, 140 billion, over 140 billion. What does that mean? Let me put it in context. PayPal has a market cap of 134 billion. Deere, like John Deere, market cap of 132 billion. Lockheed Martin has a market cap of 121 billion. Caterpillar, like the heavy construction equipment, has a market cap of 119 billion. So just to put that number in context.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. I think he also said that he generally likes to sit more around the $30 billion range, cash on hand. So he's well above what he's...
And 30 billion about the market cap of Spotify.
Yeah. Is it?
Yeah.
Wow. However, news has surfaced that he has finally bought something, and it is in his circle of competence because he's bought another insurance company called, now apologies to Americans, but it's Allegheny. I don't know.
I've only seen it written Allegheny. I don't know.
Anyway, he's bought an insurance company for a meager 11.6 billion.
Is that all?
Full cash. Yeah. So the guy loves insurance.
Loves insurance.
Loves it for good reason. For good reason. It is his biggest deal since 2016.
I think it's their first full acquisition since 2016.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like buy the whole company rather than invest in part of a company.
Yeah. The last time they did a full deal was Precision Cast Parts. Again, he loves that, always talking about it. 37 billion.
37 billion.
Yeah. So not a massive acquisition in the grand scheme of things for Berkshire, but he does like insurance companies because of the float or the money that comes in from the premiums that allows him to then reinvest that into his cash pile.
Stocks. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Now, we talk about really knowing a company and doing due diligence on a company, really watching them and taking your time. Well, this is the quintessential example of due diligence. Buffett was quoted as saying, "Berkshire will be the perfect permanent home for Allegheny, a company that I have closely observed for 60 years." Now, if you're not doing that level of due diligence, Bryce, you're not at Buffett's standard.
Unbelievable.
He's almost at intergenerational due diligence level.
That's crazy. That's crazy. But
you know Allegheny is old because their New York Stock Exchange ticker is just Y.
Wow.
Just one letter. You don't see that these days.
Respect. So look, he does still have 135 billion left in the bank, and we keep saying that with such market volatility, there could be another deal around the corner. He hasn't said anything of the like, but
all right, I'm going to play a quick fire game with you. This
okay.
or that. Which would you rather? Buffett acquiring edition. You're Warren Buffett. You got your cash pile. Twitter or Spotify?
Spotify.
Peloton or Zillow?
Zillow.
Robinhood or Roku?
Roku.
Affirm or Zip?
Affirm. Sorry, Zip.
Well, what if I told you, Bryce, that if you were Warren Buffett, you could have bought all of those 8 companies and still had money left over?
I would believe you.
Still have 11 billion left in the bank.
Wow.
Twitter, Spotify, Peloton, Zillow, Robinhood, Roku, Affirm, Zip. Some of the biggest companies hit by like the biggest losers from this recent tech sell-off. He could just start cleaning them up. Spotify, I'd love to see Buffett own. I don't reckon he listens to a lot of music on his phone.
No. Just goes to show the power that some of these massive asset managers have as well. Oaktree, I think, has about 166 billion. You know, that like these guys could just go to town on some of these.
Well,
yeah. It's interesting. But anyway, nonetheless, 60 years of due diligence on a company, that is really in line with his thesis of making sure you invest in what you know.
Yeah.
And waiting for the right opportunity.
Yeah.
He waited 60 years. Nice one, Buffett. Good to see. All right, Ren. Well, we've had a request from Jesse via email to have a bit of a dive into what's going on in Neuralink and BrainChip, and this is quite timely for us, given that we have done a bit of research.
Yeah, so as we said at the top of the show, we're launching our news podcast, not quite daily news, 3 times a week news podcast, And we've been practicing here internally at Equity Mates, and we did a practice episode on Neuralink and brain chip technologies. So we've got a bunch of information. So timely request, Jesse. So we figured we'd have a chat about it. Not a full industry deep dive because the investable opportunity set isn't quite there yet. But hey, maybe it will be in the future.
That's it.
So Elon Musk's Neuralink remains the most well-known startup in this space. He's been pretty public about trying to put chips in our brains.
Yeah.
It's such an aggressive thing to say.
I know.
So the Neuralink was founded in 2016, and they've been working on, and they've been quite successful, and we'll talk about some of the milestones that they've hit. But I think the important place to start is it's not just Elon. There's a number of other startups in this space working to build a brain-computer interface or put a chip in your brain.
Yeah.
Hit me with some of those names, Bryce.
Names that you would probably be very familiar with. Synchron, a New York-based company. They have received permission from the US Food and Drug Administration last year to start testing in tests in skull-implanted devices on humans. Does sound quite intense, doesn't it? Paradromics, they're introducing tiny electrodes into the human brain with people with disabilities that impede communication and movement. The originally titled Brain Co. Classic. There's always one company that emerged from Harvard Innovation Lab, and they develop a wireless headband that can measure brain activity. And then Emotive, who, like Brain Co., develop wearable neuro headsets. So the final one, Ren, is Kernel.
Well, the final one that we've got listed, but there's a bunch of others. MindMaze, NeuroSky, NeuroPro, Neurable. I think the important thing to note, though, is that there's two distinct versions of this work. One is the invasive, put
In the
something
brain, in
in
the
your
skull.
brain,
Yeah.
like Elon Musk's Neuralink. And then the non-invasive, which we have titled accessories, things like headbands and headsets, and that won't require surgery or a chip in the skull. They're the majority at the moment. That's where a lot of the research is focused. The invasive stuff is a little bit more fringe, but it's progressing, I think, is the important point. So the important question: why? Why are we pursuing this? Aren't our brains enough as it is? Do we really need a computer chip in there?
Well, Ren, there are two reasons. The first is that it will help disabled people gain or regain their ability to move or communicate, which amazing.
And I think that's really where this use case is super exciting. And one of the examples we found when we were researching for this daily episode used blindness as an example, and there's three approaches that they spoke about. There's an accommodative approach, which would be what we do now, train guide dogs, help people move through the world as someone who's blind. And then there's a biological approach, and there's a bunch of research going on about, regrowing parts of the eye, regrowing the retina and stuff like that. And so that's how do you work on a biological approach to this disability. And then the third one, which Elon Musk is a big proponent of, is an artificial approach. And that's where a brain-computer interface would get the visual data to the right part of the brain via a computer or a computer chip, basically bypassing the eyes. And so that was an example we read about that we thought sort of exemplified the different approaches and where Elon thinks he can make a difference.
Yeah, well, then the second reason is to keep up with AI. Now, this might sound a bit weird, but the biggest point of friction in our engagement with technology is our fingers. Just a bit
explain
weird.
that to me.
Well, interaction between our brains and our computers is limited by how fast we can type, scroll, punch the keyboard. We're limited by that.
Yeah.
And for someone who can't touch type as fast as you, Ren, it's an issue.
Yeah, our brain is a supercomputer, our phone is a supercomputer, and the only thing that slows those two supercomputers just interacting at incredible speeds is our fat fingers.
Yeah, our parents who still type with one finger. So imagine if you could perform Google searches, essentially control your technology through thought.
Yeah.
The speed of that is just going to be exponential, and I think the flow-on effects from that is obviously increasing humanity's intelligence. Now, it is a bit of a stretch, but that's an awesome capability to think about.
And people might say intelligence is the wrong word because intelligence is, so many different things, but some of the key building blocks of intelligence you could definitely improve. For example, memory. Imagine if you could augment your memory with a computer-like storage. You connect it to the cloud, like you didn't forget anything.
Overwhelming.
And then just like access to information and these like key building blocks of intelligence start to just become supercharged.
Yeah, it's weird. The idea of intelligence kind of changes. I think it becomes more about creativity.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's
like
about how you use
what
all this
you
information.
use with the information.
Yeah.
If everyone has access to the same level of information.
Look, I mean, there's a really utopian vision where it's like just beautiful, and then there's so many dystopian versions of this future.
Well, Ren, that brings me to a question. Will I have a computer chip in my brain?
Yeah, so this is where we can start to talk about what we've seen in terms of progress, and it has been moving in one direction. In 2020, a brain chip was successfully inserted into a pig. In 2021, a brain chip was successfully inserted into a monkey. And then the researchers taught that monkey to play video games, and you can jump on YouTube and watch it play.
Jeez.
And now, 2022, we have multiple startups progressing to human trials. So
Crazy.
It's sort of that's where we're at. Like, people this year will have computer chips in their brain. Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, put a job ad up in January of this year to hire a clinical trial director. And another startup, Synchron, they've actually started human trials last year, including a 4-person trial in Australia. Separate to these trials, December 2021, and again in Australia, a paralyzed man sent out the first ever direct thought tweet after having a computer chip implanted in his brain.
Wow.
So, like...
It's happening.
I don't know if we can right now answer the question, will you? But will someone? The answer is yes.
It's happening. Well, with all things that really push the boundaries and progress quickly, where's government regulation at with this stuff?
Yes. So unsurprisingly, governments have been... This is kind of heavy, actually. Unsurprisingly, governments have been, 1, slow to respond, and 2, looking for military applications.
Classic.
But Chile was the first country to pass legislation regulating the use of neurotechnology. In September last year, they passed a neuro rights law aiming to protect mental privacy, free will of thought, and personal identity. Just thinking about why they have to pass that law to protect free will of thought. But so that's Chile. In the US and China, rather than regulating it, they're more looking at how they can fund research into military uses. So the US Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, the organization that also brought us the internet, in 2018, they funded 6 separate, highly ambitious brain-computer interface research projects. And in China, the government launched the China Brain Project in 2016, a 15-year scheme intended to bring China level with and eventually ahead of the US and EU in neuroscience research. And so I think that captured some of these things. Even Australia's getting in on the act.
Yeah.
We're not going to be left behind. The Department of Defence down under here is funding a $1.2 million research project for a vehicle that could be controlled via brainwaves.
Wow.
So it feels like things are moving in one direction. There are so many questions. My biggest question becomes around cost and inequality. Because if it is the case that these brain chips allow us to keep up with artificial intelligence, but they become really expensive to have the surgery and there's a limited supply, that inequality starts to become really stark, because the people that can afford it are supercomputers, and the rest of us who can't afford a house, let alone a chip in our brain, are left behind. So, look, that is just a snippet of the work we did for the daily episode. But Jesse, request came in at the right time. If we finish where we started, with Bryce asking is he going to get a chip in his brain, I mean, chances are probably
possible.
You'll have that choice at some point.
Hopefully.
Would you do it?
No idea. I too early. I think, to your point, I can see real positives, but some real negatives with it as well. Like,
this is unrelated. A Thought Starters article a while ago. There was like a startup that did. It wasn't brain chips, but some other medical device that was implanted, and then the startup went out of business, and all of the support for this device then went with it.
Right.
And so that would be my biggest risk. Like, I wouldn't want a brain chip startup putting something in my brain, because that support needs to be there for life.
Yeah.
And like maintenance needs to be there for life.
This has got to be something that's very, very well established, proven, all those ones. Anyway, make sure you check out The Dive. Subscribe now. We will be going live, and we'll be unpacking more really interesting business stories such as that one. So, hit it up. It'll be in your podcast app now. All right, Ren, well, to close out, the final segment, we noticed that Morningstar's global best ideas for March 2022 have come in. A list of 77 stocks, and there were 13 Aussie stocks on that list. So we're just going to quickly go through a couple of the stocks. But
it was an interesting list.
Yeah. Well, first let's just quickly take a look at how they build the list. They obviously have a bias towards valuation. They have a Morningstar rating, which is a rating out of 5, and it is the rating based on valuation. So 5 stars being the stock is significantly undervalued, and 1 star being it is overvalued. They do talk about economic moats. They range that from this company has no moat, a narrow moat, or a wide moat. They then throw in an uncertainty rating, which is about how confident the analysts are in their valuation rating. High being they're not confident given the underlying business. And then they also have a price to fair value number as well. So for me, if I were looking at stocks, I'd be looking at stocks that are 3 to 5 star in valuation. Definitely have a moat. I don't want a company that has no moat, and a low uncertainty rating. And less than 1 for a price to fair value. That's what I would be looking at. But I would also those were few and far between.
I would also just be taking anyone else's work with a grain of salt.
Oh, absolutely. So, should we rip through some of the 13 Australian stocks?
Yeah, well, there was some in there that was surprising. So 12-month price performance for some of these stocks has not been great. A2 Milk, down 36%.
Yeah.
AGL Energy,
down
30%.
Yeah.
AGL being Australia's biggest coal-fired power operator. Not exactly a hot stock, if you will. Kogan, down 57% this year. Magellan, down 67%. Southern Cross Media, down 19%. So there's a few unloved stocks that obviously valuations for Morningstar analysts are starting to look good, but companies that probably aren't spoken with love in financial media at the moment. Yeah,
the reason that these have come onto the list, my guess anyway, is that they're trading at a price that Morningstar analysts believe is now at a significant discount to what they see as fair value.
Yeah.
And with a lot of them, though, there is a high level of uncertainty because there are, whatever environment the business is operating in, there are more factors that go into it from an investment point of view than just the price.
Yeah. So let's give everyone the full 13 stocks if they want to do their own research, add them to their watch list. Obviously, we've caveated them very strongly with what we just said before. So Morningstar's 13 Australian stocks: A2 Milk, AGL Energy, Horizon, Brambles, G8 Education, Invocare, Kogan.com, Lend-Lease, Magellan Financial, Southern Cross Media, Westpac, Woodside, WiseTech.
Nice.
Only 3 of those stocks up in the past 12 months.
3 up, 13 Aussie out of a list of 77 on their global list.
Yeah.
So, any kind of key takeaways from you, Ren, on that?
Yeah, so looking at the full list of 77, I was surprised to see only one of the trillion-dollar tech titans, which is what I'm labeling them now.
Yeah.
Can you guess it? Which one? You can probably actually just read
Amazon.
the notes, can't you? Yeah.
No, I've looked at the list.
Yeah, so Amazon was the only one there in their best ideas list. Westpac, the only of Australia's big 4 banks. 23 of the 77 Morningstar rated as wide moats, meaning more than 2/3 of their best ideas for March they don't think have wide moats, which surprised me.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, it's an interesting list. It's an interesting list to start your own research, but for me, a list like that is very much the start of the process, not the end of the process.
That's exactly my takeaway. I think that it's easy to see the headlines, best global ideas for 2022, get a list of 77 stocks and browse down and see names that you know, see that it's got a 5-star and away we go. But there's so much more that goes into this process. So I think just like a general warning for the Equity Mates community that if you do have these sorts of things, it is a great idea generator, but please have a look under the hood.
The one thing I will give Morningstar credit for is that they say when they take things off the list.
Yep.
Because every investment bank seems to now publish the clickbait X broker or X investment bank's best stocks for insert year here. You know, Bell Potter's top 10 stocks for 2022, Macquarie's 50 stocks for 2021, you know, whatever it is. But they never tell you when they're selling. They never update you on the list, and, you know, they never say, oh, well, 3 of those are definitely not on the list anymore because things have changed. So the one thing that I think Morningstar, the way that Morningstar do it is better is they will say when they've removed something from the list as well.
Yeah. It's worth checking out. They do give a couple of paragraphs on each of the stocks. Like the Kogan one, they start by saying shares in no moat Kogan.
No moat Kogan, yeah.
So I think that's pretty funny. But they definitely do spell out what they think is fair value and some of the reasons as to why. So if you want to have a look at that, you do have to be a premium member, unfortunately. But I think my key takeaway, this is not gospel. Use it as an idea generator, as they've called it, equity best ideas.
Well, I mean, if people from Morningstar are listening and they are really confident in this, maybe they could track the performance of their best ideas and put that at the top or something. So we could see over the past 12 months, an index of their best ideas has returned.
Yeah, you know what? I have a feeling they actually might do that.
Oh, really?
They might do that somewhere. So before you come at us, Morningstar, we'll take that as a note to double check before coming in next
Morningstar
time.
do have an ETF,
Yeah,
but it's their Morningstar wide moat ETF, so it's a bit different to their best ideas.
Yeah.
It's a cool concept for an ETF, but again, it's like you have to be confident in their analysis of moats. But if you are, an ETF of wide moat companies is an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a wrap, Ren. We've made it to the end of this week's episode. Make sure 2 things that you could do for us. Actually, 3 things that would be really, really helpful. Firstly, FinFest, register. So equitymates.com/FinFest. Secondly, The Dive, Equity Mates Media's newest podcast launching soon. That's going to give you one great business story each episode. And then thirdly, please, if you could rate and review this podcast or any of the other podcasts in the Equity Mates Media Network that you listen to, that would be greatly appreciated. It certainly goes a long way to helping us get in front of new investors and people to join the Equity Mates community. Thank you for your support as always. Next week, we actually have a different Monday episode coming up where we're going to be going deep on all things Web3 with an expert that really is deep in the game.
It's not often a guest makes me feel old.
Yes.
But God, I felt old.
Yeah, felt old, felt excited. So stick around to tune in next Monday where we chat to a guy who is investing in Web3 metaverse. So, Ren, always great to chat stocks, and we'll pick it up next week.
Sounds good.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.